How many of you guys have heard of Maker? Cool. Does anyone in here own any MKR? Okay, it's kind of hard to get. It's not like you can go on Poloniex. So there's Maker is a stablecoin, or they want to make a stablecoin, but there's actually two coins within the Maker ecosystem, the MakerDAO. There's MKR, and then there's DAI, which is the actual stablecoin. So we'll talk about both tonight, but a little bit about me. My name's Coury D. It's a terrible last name to have when you're talking to people on tech support, which is what I do a lot. What? Crypto is not my day job. It's more like my night obsession. And I became obsessed with Bitcoin not too far before I met Kent, and then he told me about Ethereum, which I'm really glad he did. It was still like 80 cents, and yeah, it sounded really cool, and it's great. And I got really into crypto. Like, I heard about it a while ago. I didn't really, I don't know, just internet, like e-money, it didn't seem too feasible. I didn't really get it. I didn't look into it. You know, I saw, like, way back in high school, Zeitgeist, that movie. I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen that movie. It's probably why a lot of you might be here, but it blows your mind open about the Fed and what's going on there, and then kind of move into, like, how does money really work? Why, like, what does the Fed do? How is it affecting the economy? How does it affect my life? And, you know, the dollar is, like, deceivingly stable in the short term, but over the long term, we've all seen the graph, which it'll be up later, of the dollars from like 1913 to now. It's like 5 cents on the dollar. It's like, Jesus, what's happening here? So this is actually my first presentation. Forgive me if I get anything wrong. If I do get anything wrong, then just you can send that to my email with any corrections. Actually, better yet, just send it to that one. So since it's kind of late, I won't go over this too much, but I wanted to, like, warm us up. I think we've all had a pretty good warm up already with the previous discussions, but what makes good money? We've had, like, beads, hides, metals, paper, plasticky paper, if you're from Canada or Australia. That's actually pretty cool. Cash, but there's basically like three properties. The first being a store of value. So this is like allows you to save, which is actually a really incredible technology if you think about it. You can kind of trap time. And before, when you can't really, like, take your berries and put it in your rabbit skin wallet or your cave vault and, like, give it to your grandkids or something, and, you know, bequeath them some fortune or save it for a rainy day or your crops fail. It just doesn't work. But, like, with money and all, you know, like, this technology comes about, and you can afford to, you know, do art. Anyways, the second property is it's a medium of exchange. In order to be good currency, it needs to be medium of exchange, and good medium exchange has all of these properties here. Durable. You need to be able to divide it. It needs to be fungible. This money needs to look the same as that. Portable, relatively scarce, and resistant to counterfeiting. Luckily, cryptocurrencies excel at every one of these, like, beyond even gold, arguably. And lastly, it needs to be a unit of account. And it's not really a good unit of account if it's not a, like, good medium of exchange or store of value, and vice versa. They are all, like, really dependent on each other, but the unit of account is very important because you can get prices, and with prices comes this kind of emergent property of price signaling, which is really interesting. It just happens. Like, we're not even trying. When we go to, you know, get a bagel or something like that, it's sending all kinds of signals throughout the market, you know, to the wheat grower, to the baker, to the truck driver who delivers it. Like, just that one action has all of these ramifications that you don't even know about, and you're just transacting with your saved money or your earned money. It's pretty incredible. It's one of the reasons why communism, Marxism, whatever you want to call it, didn't really work so well, is because they didn't have a rational means to price things. They had this, kind of board of however many people, and they just almost arbitrarily decided what the prices were. And there's actually a funny story of some bureaucrat in the Soviet Union was talking about, like, we want every country to be socialist. Like, that would be awesome. That's what our ideals are, except New Zealand, because that's where we get our prices from. Like, we copy their prices. Without that, we wouldn't know what to do. Just like, it wouldn't really work that, like, if you got rid of every other country's pricing system and it all just became centrally managed, like New Zealand's, it would just, every time some country went socialist, the price signaling would just deteriorate, and then you would just have New Zealand, well, you might get like an accurate price on sheep, because they're good at that, but like, that's about it. So, stablecoins, so that's about money, and stable money is important for all these reasons, and I'm sure a lot of us got into Bitcoin because we wanted something better than the dollar, we wanted something better than what the Fed, what this central kind of bank is doing. And Bitcoin offers us that, except Bitcoin is super volatile. It actually kind of sucks as a currency, as we all have seen. Like, I try to get my parents to, they have BitPay at their business. I'm the only one who ever buys with BitPay there. It's like, no one, it's like, it's not, even eGold wasn't very good. There, obviously all the smart contract stuff is gonna be what really makes this stuff shine, but in order to be a currency, get out of the dollar, just get out of fiat, it needs to be stable. So, but it's kind of a weird, like, a lot of people don't want crypto to be stable. It's just, we all want to like put in $1 and be a millionaire next week or something like that, which I mean, can't argue with that. So seriously, why though? Does anyone here have any thoughts on why a stable coin? What's up?
Well, the reason you need a stable currency is because if you want people to use it, you have to have some sort of stability and value. Because if it doesn't have a stable value, people aren't going to use it to exchange it. If it's going up in value, they're going to hoard it.
Yep.
If it's going down in value, they're going to spend it. And they're not going to use it in the way it's supposed to. They can't depend on putting it in there. They always have to watch the price in order to figure out what the value of the thing in the pocket is that they're going to spend.
Yeah.
If they can't put it in their pocket and forget about it for at least a week or so, then it's not that useful.
Just an extension of that for planning purposes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, obviously stagflation and inflation are both horrible, and that's essentially what the reverse of stability is.
Yeah. And I mean, the Fed would argue, the people at the Fed would argue that deflation is also horrible because it leads to like what hoarding. People think, oh, then my money's going to be worth more tomorrow. I'm just going to hold it. I think there's a lot of interesting arguments around that, but I mean, the kind of volatility we see in Bitcoin, like those kind of conversations are irrelevant. Like when it goes from 200 to 800, like is that deflation, or is that just like a bunch of kindergartners on coke like getting on Ploniacs? Like what's happening? So I think. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Kind of what Patrick said, but I was just going to give you one other set of terminology for it. It really allows humans in a diverse diverse spread out economy who don't necessarily know each other, don't necessarily trust each other, to coordinate across time. So I think you could summarize what you were saying.
Yeah.
So you could actually argue with the fall of the US dollar over 100 years, as long as it's kind of one way, and it does tend to go one way.
Yeah.
It inflates and becomes less valuable. Yeah. And you have expectations.
Predictable. Yeah.
For the next year or two, you can still kind of coordinate across time.
Yeah.
But a stable coin would give you better.
I think that's part of the like efficient market hypothesis, that if it's predictable, it can be priced in, it can be accounted for. It's the uncertainty. It's I think Robert Higgs is an economist, dubbed it the regime uncertainty. When you just have, when the entrepreneurs, the businessmen don't know what's going to happen, they just kind of stop doing business. And whether that's good or bad, depends on your philosophy.
Another way to say, what's the cost to hedge the dollar versus the cost to hedge Bitcoin? A lot more expensive to hedge Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Because it's so volatile.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the point.
So better UX, like right now we have to go dollar to crypto to whatever else and then back out. And then like if you're gambling, you're also, like if you're gambling on Ether dice or Bit Satoshi dice, you're also kind of gambling on the price of the cryptocurrency you're gambling with. So you're not only just gambling on the poker hand you have, but you're gambling on the price of Ether. I'm not really a big gambler, so I think, but that just is a good example of why. Smart contract innovation. So like what you were saying, time sensitive. Like if there's going to be cool time sensitive smart contracts like smart wills, you want to lock up some Ether for just or whatever for your kids or your grandkids, and you want to have it auto execute and all those cool things we've heard Andreas Antonopoulos talk about. That you're not going to put like Dogecoin. You just don't know if in 30 years or 60 years when your kid's like going to get this, if that's going to be worth anything. So, and then stability, mass adoption, and innovation. Just banking, retail, escrow services, and of course the great fiat exit, separation of money and state, which is like the Rothbardian utopia, the libertarian's wet dream there. Here is a graph of Bitcoin's volatility index from 2011 to now. It's been getting better, but compared to the dollar and just fiat, that's the USD and the euro, it's just not. You're not gonna buy your groceries with this stuff. It's way too crazy. It's more of a speculative store of value, which is kind of weird. Like I'm sure we can all, like most people who have bought in to these things now, like it feels more like a speculation. I mean, I don't know if you can all agree with that. It absolutely is. And then, even though the dollar is really stable, on that graph, here's our famous dollar graph. I don't know what was happening. Was that World War I? Just that enormous, cut in half within a couple of years there. Yeah. The Great Depression. Yeah, and then I think that's when the big bait and switch with FDR's gold, $20 to $35 thing happened right there. But then just World War II, and then 5 cents on the dollar.
The first two big drops were war funding.
What's that?
War funding. So the government doing things to
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Yeah,
destroy the value.
yeah. We need to inflate to buy tanks, etc.
It was 78, we did Nixon decouple, 78? 71.
71.
Yeah, the what was it? It wasn't the Bretton Woods. Bretton Woods was in the 40s, but he nullified that agreement. Yeah. So. Yeah.
There aren't any major spikes around the late 80s, early 90s.
If you cut this here and this was up there, I'm sure you'd see some crazy
A
stuff.
big part of it is a non-logarithmic graph.
Yeah.
So you're looking, the 1913
Yeah.
number gets magnified by 10.
Yeah.
If you showed it on a logarithmic graph, there'd be more variation there. But it has been very stable. They call it the Great Moderation. It has been relatively stable, more stable.
Yeah, compared to a lot of other fiat currencies, pretty good. But I'm just wondering if we can get even better than that. So how do we do the Fed? If you think of the dollar as a stable coin, how does the Fed do it? They have to manipulate supply and demand, which sounds really dirty. It kind of is. If you're from the Austrian persuasion, that's what central banking is. You don't really manipulate supply if you're a gold miner. You just try to mine more and then you sell it. But Maker is trying to do this decentralized central banking. If you hear Rune Christensen talk in some of the podcasts and his interviews, he almost has this reverence for, I don't want to say he has a reverence for central banking, but some of the ideas that come out of that academia, he understands that there's some things worth taking out of there, which have thrown a lot of crypto enthusiasts off. but I think he's picking some good things out and making a cool system here. So the two supply side problems are, and Vitalik wrote an article regarding this quite a while ago, is like, how do you create it and who do you give it to? You just gonna like have this smart contract created out of thin air and just like randomly give it to people? Not in Maker's case. Maker uses a trustless leveraging platform as like the base. And then out of this kind of profit motivated system is the DAI stablecoin. So MakerDAO, the components are the Maker coin, which is the kind of the governance token, which is risky, but could have some high profits with that risk, and you also get the ability to vote in the governance process. And then there's the DAI stablecoin, which didn't stand for decentralized autonomous insurance when they created it, but yeah, it's a backronym. It's kind of cool. So the DAI is pegged to the SDR, which is a basket of currencies that the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, manages, and it's like the dollar, the euro, the pound, the yen, the yuan. I don't know if there's any others in there, but they basically adjust. The IMF adjusts the weights every 5 years depending on economic output of those countries. The idea is to make a really, really like the stable coin of the world. And I don't think the average Joe can buy an SDR. We might be able to buy derivatives or something, but it's mostly for countries and yeah, maybe you know.
No, I
Yeah.
just have a question.
Yeah.
I don't know about the MakerDAO very much.
No, but the
Do you know
SDR.
if they intend to keep it pegged to IMF long term, or was that just an initial thing?
That's an initial thing. They have talked about pegging it to a basket of commodities or just getting more, but they need, like, as far as what we've got now, and it's building an Oracle system, which would be required for this DAO. Having that one asset is just kind of the easiest, and it was better than going with like the dollar or the pound or whatever to have this globally stable currency. The second thing is the DAO governance model. So there's weekly meetings, there's voting. We'll get into some of the things that need to be governed. There's like collateralization ratios of some of the assets that actually back the DAI stablecoin. There's the keepers, which are kind of the autonomous. They're not autonomous. They're like anyone here could be a keeper. They're just profit motivated, fun motivated individuals who want to like keep. They help keep the system safe just by interacting with it, and we'll talk about those. And then there's like the big money kahuna, the CDPs, collateralized debt position engine. This is like the smart contract, and they're still developing it. They've been developing it for a while. They've been testing it. I'm sure they've gone through a lot of iterations. But that's like the cool, that's kind of the hard thing to explain, but it's super cool. We'll get into that. Oh, actually, yeah, I'll just explain kind of a CDP real quick so you can hash it out. Basically, in order to create DAI or issue DAI, you have to collateralize it. So you have to put something up, and they usually use the like 1 to 1.5 ratio. So you have to put like $150 of Bitcoin into a CDP, and out comes $100 worth of DAI. So it always has to have a positive collateralization. Now the benefit of that is the only reason why you'd want to issue DAI is if you wanted to use it as leverage. So if you want to hold DAI for the stability properties, you would just go on the open market, Poloniex, and just buy DAI from people who've already issued it. If you want to issue DAI, you're doing it because you want to go long something. You want to go long Bitcoin. So maybe maybe you lock Bitcoin up in a CDP. You get a certain amount of DAI from that, and then you buy Bitcoin with that DAI, and you've kind of leveraged your Bitcoin position. Or you can hedge. You can buy Ether, whatever. Like you can buy another asset. But the point is, it's almost like a decentralized loan bank. Like it's a trustless loan. Like you just do it, and it happens. And
who's the counterparty to the DAI? Who's holding $150 of Bitcoin?
So the issuer puts up that Bitcoin. Anyone can be an issuer.
It just stays in a contract somewhere?
Yes, it's the CDP. It's the collateralized deposition. And the problem is, and we'll get into it, is like if whatever's collateralizing it lowers in value, like what do you do? Like now the value of the DAI is put into the question, because if it's under collateralized, then obviously the DAI is going to fall away from its peg to the SDR if Bitcoin lowers relative to the SDR. Zepken.
This might be coming up in the presentation, but can you speak more to what incentivizes people to collateralize, to put their money there?
Yeah, it's just the ability to leverage. So you can essentially, you can just go long Bitcoin. Or I mean, that's just one example. You can go long in something, so you can put $1,000, let's say $1,500 into a CDP of whatever collateralization of your choice, Bitcoin, Ether, or maybe even the dollar eventually. You get 1,000 DAI. Now you still kind of have your $1,500 of Bitcoin locked in there. You can always get it back out if you repay the DAI that you borrowed out of it. But you can use that, it's like a loan, and you're just putting up, it's like taking equity out on your house. You still live in your house, you still have it, it's like, yeah, it's kind of the banks for the time being. What's that?
What's the haircut of interest rate?
So there is an interest rate. We'll get into that. So the DAI, it's the idea is like it's going to be a diversified and have this excess collateral base. Whether it's 150%, I mean that's pretty big. That's a pretty big capital cost to lock up 150% capital and only get 100%. Like in the real world, it's much lower. So I think it's going to be depending on, like, the governance will determine, all right, Digix is really, it's tied to gold. It's not as risky. I think the collateralization ratio on that can be lower. Maybe Dogecoin, like 500% collateralization or something like that.
So that's the haircut. I missed that one.
Okay. It's going to be pegged at 0.73 SDR, which is $1 right now. When it goes live, that might be different. And then there will be gradual deflation. So you could hold SDR, or you could hold DAI, and you're going to get like maybe 2, 3, 4%. I don't know. It depends on certain parameters of what's going on. But there's just this natural deflation in DAI. So you can just hold it, and that's kind of one of the incentives to holding the DAI.
Who pays? How?
Okay, yeah. So, that's one of the later slides, but really shortly, the oracles who provide, and I think it's part of the governance, the oracles who provide the SDR peg, the peg is just raised. It's just the number, and then the system moves the DAI to the peg, and based on all the.
How does the peg work? Wouldn't there be a market price? And that would always differ from the peg unless someone's managing the supply and demand?
Yeah, so like the management is decentralized. And yeah, it's super confusing right now, but just like we'll go through the whole thing, and then at the end we can talk. I know it's really, yeah, it's kind of hard.
Is your last slide going to be the Federal Reserve controls this?
So the peg increases annually, which is why this deflation, and it's kind of like a savings interest rate. And eventually, yeah, it might be pegged to a bigger basket, not just the SDR. Maker and DAO governance. So the MKR holders, the other coin, you can just hold it, or you don't have to participate in governance. You can go and vote on stuff. The risk is that as an MKR holder, you're the lender of last resorts. If there's a big under collateralization and all the features of the system don't come into play and save all the like CDPs from just getting tanked, then you have to bail out the bad CDPs. And the idea is like the CDPs will, as they approach 100% collateralization, there's all these mechanisms to incentivize the keepers to basically margin call the CDPs before they hit the dead zone. If they go under 100%, there's no incentive for a keeper to buy it out, because they'd be essentially putting up like, say, $100 worth of DAI to get $95 worth of whatever's locked up in that CDP, which we'll go through like a step-by-step situation.
So the MKR holders, the liquidity providers for the CDP?
No, they just are like the lender of last resort. The liquidity providers are anyone who wants to anyone who wants to interact with the DAO and lock up something into a CDP so they can get DAI and use that DAI for whatever they want to do. Most likely leverage or hedge something. The benefit is that the interest rate on a CDP, there is an interest rate for using a CDP. It's not free. That excess money or DAI is put into a reserve fund for the DAO, and they do weekly buy and burns of the MKR. So if everything goes great and there's no like massive black swan scenarios and bailouts, the MKR supply just dwindles and dwindles, and your MKR just goes up and up and up. And I mean, I asked the founders, like, is there theoretically a situation where you could have like, it could just be awesome and work great for like 50 years, and then there, you have these buy and burns, and you have like 2 MKR, and maybe like people have 0.0005893 MKR. I mean, it would just be weird because right now there's 1 million MKR, and the way, I don't know if you guys are familiar with how they've distributed it. They've gotten a lot of, they've gotten some flack for that. People think they're like a pump and dump because they're the kind of the DAO holds a lot of this initial MKR, and they didn't really hype up the, actually that's my next point here. They didn't hype up the whole sale of MKR. This is kind of one of the criticisms, but I think especially now that we've seen what happened with the DAO, it's a different framework, but all that hype, there's a lot of money that went in there, and it's a shitty situation. And I'm kind of glad they didn't hype this up. And they did it for a reason, because they want the MKR holders to be like really knowledgeable and invested in the system. And they're not just going to hand out MKR or sell it willy-nilly. They're selling it to people on their forums and in their chat channels. And they did one little Reddit post to tell everyone about it. But they're getting more out there now. But
so let me understand. So the advantage of how the MKR holders make money is either you increase the value by the system buying back the coins.
Yeah, there's the buy and burn. Yeah.
So basically, the buy and burn mechanism is out there buying. It's just like Warren Buffett when he doesn't give dividends. What he'll go do is he'll go out to the market, and sometimes, or at least I don't believe he does. He'll go out to the market and he'll buy a stock if the stock is too low, and it pumps the stock back up, and at the same time it decreases his on-hand cash. So yeah, okay, I get that.
Yeah, there's deflation. There's deflation in MKR through the buy and burn, and deflation in DAI through the peg adjustment. So there's kind of deflations in both, but the DAI is like stable, and the peg adjustment is predictable. The MKR is susceptible to this bailout, black swan, under collateralization scenario.
So I can still given that I can go out into the market and buy an MKR coins if I want.
Actually, yeah, right now you can do that. DAI is not out yet.
Okay.
Yeah, so the keepers, they're kind of like meta miners. They go out and margin call the CDPs. We'll go over that in a minute. They just like scrape the blockchain, and you're like, who are these people? How do they do it? Well, they also are a price oracle. They have I think they have a Docker image right now, but the ideal is like they're going to put it on a Raspberry Pi. You just plug in this Raspberry Pi. You might be able to like mess with some of the parameters to optimize it for you, but it's just going to do this and scrape the chain and look for under collateralized CDPs and buy them out. If the owners of those CDPs aren't vigilant and see that the value of their collateralization is going down, then the keepers come in at a certain point. They can come in, it's profitable for them to come in and buy it out before it hits kind of the dead zone under 100% collateralization. All right, so the CDPs, this is maybe one of the hardest slides. Oh, no, maybe not. Slide's coming up. They create the DAI, like this smart contract issues the DAI, you interact with it, you lock up collateral, you get your collateral back by paying the DAI plus the interest rate, and you just get your collateral right back. It maintains the DAI's SDR peg through kind of the incentive and how it interacts, how it makes the keepers interact with it. And there's the stability fee or the interest rate, APR. CDP ownership is transferable, which makes for some interesting smart contract applications, but only like if you're not an owner of the CDP, you can still buy it out, but there's kind of a bounty rate. So that is what this slide is all about. All right, so most of the time I've been talking about you put like $150 of Bitcoin in, and you get $100 in DAI out. So you're 150% collateralized. It's not advantageous for the keepers to buy out your CDP until it reaches 125%. And then from 125 to 120, there's a huge, like, it peaks there, and they get, the keepers get good profits from that, and then just from there it goes down and down until it hits 100, at which point it's in the dead zone and MKR has to do the bailout. All right, so here are some actual like step-by-step examples. Alice meets Toshi. She's very impressed by his wealth of knowledge and stunning looks. So she decides to go longer BTC. She already has 150 Bitcoin.
She loves that Australian accent, right?
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah.
That's what I did it.
He seems like
Yeah.
only a mother can love, and even she's on the fence a lot of times.
So she pops 150 bucks into a CDP, gets 100 DAI, and decides to buy even more Bitcoin. And so now she has 250 Bitcoin, she has a $100 DAI debt, and her CDP's fully, like, really nicely collateralized. And Bitcoin goes like pretty damn moon and doubles. And now her CDP is twice as collateralized. Her Bitcoin holdings, are 500. She's still in debt. Well, she just takes some of her Bitcoin winnings, pays off the CDP. She has 400. She has 400 bucks, which is, oops. I think I wrote that down. Yeah, so she nets 167. Like if she just would have kept her 150 Bitcoin, she would have only had $300 when Bitcoin doubled. But because she leveraged it with DAI, she has 400. So,
Bitcoin doubled. Maybe I missed something.
yeah.
Oh god. Okay.
Yeah, this is confusing. That was like, this is the complex step. But if there's any questions, please.
So another way to say this is just a reverse repurchase agreement.
I'm not familiar with that term, but sure.
Let's go up to this one more time.
Oh yeah, okay.
No, let's walk through it one more
Okay, so,
That's me more than this.
okay. Yeah, so like she started out with 150, and like if she didn't interact with Maker, this 150 when it doubled would have been 300.
Yeah.
But she was impressed. She loves Australians. And so she locks up the 150, gets that $100 and is able to use that as leverage, the DAI, because of this CDP. Like she just puts it in the smart contract and out comes $100 in DAI. She goes on Poloniex, which trades DAI, and sells it, buys Bitcoin, and now she has $250 in Bitcoin. She kind of, 150 of that isn't hers because it's locked up in a CDP, so it's at risk. That's why she's in this debt. But it doubles. She pays off the CDP, and she has 400 now. Does that make sense?
She pledges her collateral, gets money back, uses leverage.
Yeah. Which actually, that's a little off. It should be like, depending on what the time range of the doubling was, this doesn't take into account the interest rate. But
So it's a computerized commodity broker.
yeah, it's an autonomous like leverage loaner.
Well, yeah, I was only going to say that to Alice, it's a computer, it's that.
Yeah.
To the world, it has an emergent effect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you understand that? That's huge. You cannot miss it.
Yeah, I mean, this
Alice
is.
could lose too. I'm sure you're going to do an example.
Yeah. It's like a convoluted.
Lose, but it makes for the rest of us who aren't investing in Maker and stable.
Yeah, so there's quite a few ways to make a stable coin. There's already some out there, but this is just like, I think if you listen on the Ether review, there's a guy named, I think, Dominic Williams, if I'm not mistaken. He goes over like 4 different types, and this is one of the types he talks about, and I think it's called a DCC, a decentralized collateralized coin or something like that. But yeah, did you have a question?
How did the DAI become valuated at $250 worth of Bitcoin? When to get the $100 worth of DAI, you had to spend $150. So where did that extra $100?
She sold the DAI and bought Bitcoin.
Right, but that's what I'm saying.
And you're saying where did the valuation come from? And I think it's pegged to the SDR. Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like people know the system. It's kind of like the DAO token. Like the DAO didn't really have value except for like people just bought it, and then it had value because people trusted it. And the same thing is going to happen initially with the DAI.
Okay. So it's the SDR stability that makes this more stable than any other dividend.
But
Yeah.
could she recursively, okay, so she gets $100 DAI, she goes out and buys $100 worth of Bitcoin out of that $100 of DAI.
Mm-hmm.
So now she's got 150 locked out plus 100 in hand.
Precisely.
She could do the whole contract over and just recurse it.
Yeah, she could. But she would be
Capped out because of the haircut.
Right.
50%.
she would be leveraging. She would just be. It would be like what our banking system is now. I mean, that would totally happen, but it would just be like massively leveraged. Like an actual dollar that you hold in your wallet is different than the dollar that shows up on your online banking screen because of the amount of leverage behind what's going on.
So in aggregate, don't you have to have, people betting equally on both sides of sort of the equation, right? Every time someone wants to bet long on Bitcoin, there's got to be an equal. It just seems like to stay stable.
No, what people do with their DAI doesn't matter. It's just like the DAI is created, and if they want to use that DAI to go long or hedge or whatever they want to do with the DAI, it is the only thing that matters as far as the DAI's stability is concerned is that it's collateralized in excess.
I think there's a situation where Soros and the money speculators, they would go in and they would actually know that a currency was being defended by a country. And so what they would do is they would go in and take loans or do something whereby it would cause the banks to issue more money, which would actually deflate it more. But they would be hedging on the opposite side, forcing the value of that thing down. In this sense, what you're doing is you're doing the same type of thing. So if you've got a big somebody who's got lots of money, could actually force the value of DAI down and force the price of Bitcoin way up. Because what you're doing is you're basically buying Bitcoin, you're forcing the DAI down because you're creating it, and at the same time you're increasing the value of Bitcoin because you're buying it. Yeah. So in a sense, you could leverage if you're a big money holder, you can basically push the DAI down or hurt the makers in this case, because the makers have to defend it. And if the makers can't defend it enough, you can basically crash the system by coming in with lots of BTC and just dumping DAI, putting your BTC in the system, and then once it's really cheap, you just come out like selling roses.
Well, you can't affect the price of the DAI, right? Because it's pegged.
The makers are defending it, and if the makers don't have enough backing for it, then you could in a sense dump the whole system.
Yeah. So there are some attack vectors, and the Dominic Williams guy talks about it, and then Rune replies to him on this really interesting post on Reddit. That scenario was described, and but I won't get into depth there. But that's a really good point. Yeah.
So are there limits on the size of the contract, and what's the term of the contract?
There is no term, for what I understand, but the limit is there's a limit in the, like, if there's like the maker governance decides that Bitcoin, there just can't be like more than 20% of whatever's collateralizing the system cannot be, Bitcoin can only be 20%. Like, you can't just collateralize the entire thing with Bitcoin. There's ratios, ceilings that need to be made, which is smart. So I think they're really down on Digix because they're really like with Digix, using that as, because it's just backed by gold and it's stable, and there are some interesting critiques of that too, but it's probably the strongest, because it's actually backed by something physical. All right, so here's the real life margin call. If Bitcoin has a kind of high gravity day and it goes down 20%, her CDP goes from 150 to 120% collateralization. So, 20% of $150 is 30. So that's 30 minus $150. That's 120% collateralization. So Bob comes in with his keeper pie and scrapes up the positive bounty CDP. Bob gets $105 for 100 DAI because, remember that graph, it's only profitable for him to get in, like anything before 125%, anything above that has a negative bounty. So he'd be paying like 100 DAI for less than 100 Bitcoin, but anything like at 125, he pretty much gets 100 for 100, and then anything above that to 120 there's this positive bounty. So that, I hope.
So you're saying that there has to be at least 5% in order for you to scrape it?
No, you could scrape it. I think a lot of people will just scrape it at 1% or maybe even less than that. They'll just, because it'll be costless essentially, and it'll be whatever the cost of the transaction. They'll just be looking for any CDP that's past the 0 point, whether that's 124% collateralization all the way down to 101% collateralization. But anything below 100%, they're just getting less money.
So this is the way you actually destroy DAI. This is one way you can destroy DAI, by basically destroying it and then getting $150 in Bitcoin, 105 Bitcoin, $105 in Bitcoin for 100 DAI.
You're burning DAI.
You're basically destroying it. Okay, got it.
Yeah. So, and then the rest of it, because we had $120 in there, and Bob only got 105. The rest of that DAI is just returned to Alice, and the debt is closed. So she has $95. Her 15 that was returned, and then the 100 Bitcoin that she had bought with the DAI, and it lowered 20% in value. So she has 95. If she just would have kept her $150 in Bitcoin, she would have had $130 instead of 95.
Can she refund it at any point? For example, if it's 150, if she's at 140.
Yeah, she could buy out her CDP. If she was vigilant, she wouldn't let this kind of margin call happen. Yeah, but this is just to, there's an incentive for the CDP issuers to close out CDPs, which maintains the DAI stability, and then at a certain point, if it becomes under collateralized, there's an incentive for the keepers. All right, so just for the sake of time, this is complete collapse. The keepers can't keep up, ironically enough. Turns out Satoshi is Al Gore, and he just wanted to make it tubes for the money, and Bitcoin implodes, value down 90%. Way too fast for the keepers. A lot of CDPs hit the dead zone, because maybe 10% of the system is back collateralized by Bitcoin. Alice just automatically defaults. DAI is under collateralized. Maker bails out the dead CDPs with the DAI and the Maker reserves. Well, okay, cool. So now all the bad CDPs are out. So the idea is the MKR can be inflated, and that's the risk of holding MKR. And that's kind of the short-term price stability. There's only a few more slides left. The long term is maintained through through the deflation rate, the peg basically. They adjust the peg for hitting the long term stability. So if the DAI depreciates against the SDR, then just the DAI deflation rate rises, which makes holding DAI more attractive, greater demand for DAI, which raises the price, and makes CDP issuance less attractive because now it costs more. Like the DAI you're getting from the CDP, and then maybe in a year you pay off your CDP. Well, you have to pay off with the interest rate plus the depreciation of the DAI, so you would have had to buy more. So it just has this double incentive factor, which stabilizes the price. And then the opposite, if it appreciates, there's less demand to hold DAI, so people sell it, and the DAI price goes down. It's cheaper to issue it, use it for leveraging, so more DAI is created through CDP issuance, and that's DAI inflation, so the price goes down there. Recap, MKR holders govern the stability. DAI holders get stability, and DAI issuers get to use this trustless leveraging platform.
So, where does the interest come from to pay back the
makers? I mean, how do MKR holders?
DAI holders.
DAI holders, yeah.
DAI issuers. Yeah, so like,
if I issue 100
yeah.
DAI, but I have to pay back 100.5.
Yeah.
Where's the 0.5 come from?
Yeah, I mean, there's an interesting term for this. It's kind of like, I don't know what the term is, but it's like musical chairs. Yeah, almost. Well, no, but like in the beginning, there'll just be a bunch of people issuing DAI, and then a DAI will go on the market, and then you'll just buy the DAI and pay off the interest rate.
Doesn't Alice have to buy the DAI to pay
Yeah.
interest?
Yeah, I mean, the DAI will be on the market for Alice to repay. It's like but this poses an interesting.
The music stops, it's fine.
Yeah, well, like, so the music stopping is everyone closing out all the CDPs, which I don't think, would be. Well, I just don't think it would be. Yeah, but that is an interesting question. It's just like, why would that happen, I guess? What's up, Ken?
So in the wake of the apocalypse, I think everybody's more this one has a lot of moving parts.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot different from the DAO.
Yeah.
But
No,
it
it's
has a
crazy.
lot of complex stuff going on. Are people sort of having that in mind, or like has there been a move to maybe try to test things?
Oh, absolutely. They've been working on this. Yeah. No, I'm sure. Like, this is awesome, and you're right, there's a lot of moving parts. It's going to be really cool to see it happen. It's going to be really hard to imagine it. It's going to be hard to imagine it like taking over, the global, taking over fiat or whatever. But funny enough, the Maker team actually found the exploit that killed the DAO. And I remember getting this message from the Slack channel like, all right, everyone, we found this problem, but good news, we hacked ourselves and got the money out of there before, they kind of told everyone after the fact. So they found the recursive call exploit. And then that's when like Stefan Tool was like, oh, they found this, so it's all safe now. But like that was because of how the DAO's smart contract work. It was not safe, obviously. So.
But I guess the question is, are they funding or are they reaching out to the community to do further research to not only find the flaw that was in the DAO, but also other flaws that haven't been found yet?
Oh yeah. They're very conservative. I mean, not only have they been working on this for a lot longer, and they've done multiple security audits. Their number one like cultural like ideal is they're just completely security minded.
The internal or external audits or a combination?
I think, I mean, obviously there's going to be internal audits. It seems obvious to me that would happen. But yeah, there's external audits. Go ahead.
I missed something in the how the MKR gets to increase value again. You said something about the interest.
Buy-in burns. So the part of the interest from this,
Who's paying the interest?
the CDP issuers, people who want to use that leveraging platform, they have to pay the interest. Part of that goes to doing the MKR buy-in burns. Yeah, Alice pays the
I
interest.
think there's a time period, isn't there? When Alice puts in the money for the CDP, there is a time duration.
There's
It's not forever.
I'm pretty sure CDPs are like you can hold a CDP limitless. Yeah.
Oh, really? They don't have like a year on them.
But she's worried because the DAI might go up, and then she has to buy the DAI back, and so that means that she's got to pay back at a higher rate. That's
Incentive to watch it.
Yes.
You know, my
That's Sasha.
takeaway from your presentation is that this is a really cool, sophisticated type of derivative. But I can't help but think that if the intent is to reduce volatility, there's much simpler solutions, primarily just like more liquidity, more participants in the market, more companies like Coinbase making it easier for.
Yeah. No, I totally see. Like
It's like a really roundabout way of solving the problem.
Yeah, I mean, even if Bitcoin was as stable as the dollar, DAI would theoretically be way more stable than the dollar. So I see what you're saying. Like, if there was a big enough network effect, but the problem with getting people to use Bitcoin is it's not stable, but it can't be stable until more people use it. So if we can make a stable coin without having to rely on this kind of like mass adoption. But yeah, you're right, it's super complicated. I mean, it's crazy.
I think the complexity is the enemy of transparency, and there's just only the most sophisticated types of users could ever use this.
No, I mean, you can just go buy DAI, but if you want to like use the leveraging. Yeah, but if you want to be Alice, like, yeah, you should know what you're doing. Or if you want to be an MKR holder, and govern, you should know it. But if you want to hold a stable coin, you just go to Poloniex and buy
That's
it.
the really key point.
Yeah.
Is that Alice or any CDP purchaser really has to know what they're doing, or they're taking the risk. It isn't for everybody. It's for most people.
Exactly.
In this room, and if you're going to invest in MKR, it isn't for most of us.
Yeah, which is why they didn't hype it up.
DAI comes out, DAI is an emerging effect that then becomes like a currency that can be used.
Right, and then
That's
It's
right, it's rolled
also inherently for leverage in the first place.
Yeah.
Only for the-
Right, and so by
Yeah.
definition, it has high risk to it.
Yeah.
Not the
not for
DAI,
the
the MKR side.
No, I mean, the use of it, and buying the DAI.
The issuance of it.
The issuance.
Yeah, I mean, for these
Because
people,
why else would you do it? You've already got $150 worth of Bitcoin.
yeah.
That's Alice. And
It's
I'm
Alice.
agreeing that there's high risk for Alice.
Right.
And there's high risk for the MKR guys. They're like the private bankers of old,
Right,
who in order to loan gold, they really needed a gold reserve, right?
right.
So there's high risk. I'm just saying that the DAI as a currency, instead of
there's
the euro
no
or the US dollar, is relatively low risk once this is out for.
Okay, wait, you got one guy behind you for a while.
Some developer-oriented questions. Did you get any chance to look at like actual sold code for?
Yeah, I have, but I don't know.
I haven't been able to find any online.
Really?
I don't believe
They-
the repositories are public.
On GitHub, yeah.
They are?
I'm pretty sure it's open source, yeah.
Okay.
But I hope I'm not wrong, but I'm pretty sure I've seen their contracts on their GitHub, yeah. Or you can go in there. I mean, they're really open. You go in there. They moved off of Slack. They're on Rocket Chat. You can get in there. You can talk to Nikolai Meshuggin, a lot of these guys came from like Newbits and I don't know if it's the other stable coin platforms. They found Ethereum and they were like, whoa, we could use smart contracts and just make a better stable. We could use the things we've learned over here and do it on top of Ethereum.
These are the more BitShares guys, the big
BitShares, yeah, not Newbits.
So from a high level, you think that this is a tool to gain mass adoption, and then stability will be there inherently?
I don't, I don't have a crystal ball. Like I agree, it's super complex. There's all these, there's like some pretty major attack vectors from what I understand. Like, yeah, I mean, there's some. You're right. It's really complex, and there's a lot of things that can go wrong with it. I just think the reason why I'm fascinated with it, aside from the fact that it might produce a stablecoin, is like the game theoretical, like how they get the DAI peg to be maintained and how the keepers interact. Like the whole system is just really elegant and beautiful to me. That's why I think it's cool. But yeah, I don't have like super duper duper high hopes, but I think it's hopeful.
Have you seen any implementations of a BTC relay, like a DAI relay, so that you could build an Ethereum contract that has pegs to the DAI?
Well, DAI is on the Ethereum blockchain. It's a token on the Ethereum blockchain.
Okay.
So you wouldn't have, it's in,
So effectively,
there's no relay needed. You can trade it like you trade Digix now or whatever else.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with trading tokens.
Yeah, so like in Mist, like if you bought into the DAO, like they just hijacked that term, which kind of angers me because I think the DAO is a really cool concept. It's like naming your car company Car. Just doesn't, it doesn't really make sense. But yeah, so yeah, you can have DAO tokens you can trade, or like one cool thing, if you donate to the Ethereum Foundation, you get a unicorn token. So look into that. I have a couple unicorn tokens in my Mist wallet as well as Ether.
That's a holy grail, right? I mean, if you can get like real businesses to peg to their DAI, you effectively,
Yeah.
you know, this market.
So that's another thing that's going to form collateral other than just things locked up in the CDPs, is they're actually getting real live firms in the real world to represent collateral. So, but I don't know if that's what you were.
So are the, okay, so the model is, you've explained the model, but what about and you explained a little bit about the governance and a little bit about the people behind it. What about the marketing? I mean, is it being marketed right now?
Yeah, so like I said, they were not trying to hype it up. They've been getting out there more. They have the Ether Review podcast. They have the what's the Bitcoin Epicenter Bitcoin interview, which is really good. I mean, those guys are super smart and they drill Rune about it. Yeah. So but the marketing, they're not. Yeah, they haven't done it.
So
they haven't done it super high.
The big play here sounds like not necessarily the issue, the collateralization of your bitcoins into DAI, but rather the MKR coins, because it's still on the ground level. So in other words, if you're getting interest off of this potential future, if the interest is 0.5% of whatever people are, of whatever DIA that's out there.
DAI.
Yeah. And it's going into the MKR coins, then the biggest bang for your buck, I mean, obviously the most risky too is the MKR coins right now. And if you go
well, MKR isn't deflating right now because DAI doesn't exist yet. MKR is just a simple token that exists right now, and it has a price. It's actually I think it's like $30 or $40. But if you want to be involved with the governance, which is happening right now, they're building the system. They're deciding what developers to fund, security audits. You have to hold MKR. But the 1 million MKR, there's been no buy and burns because there's no DAI yet. They haven't gone live.
You want to buy the MKR and hold it, even if you don't want to do government.
Yeah, so just go to MakerDAO.com and you can read their white paper, and you can look at the exchange to get Maker, and I mean, yeah. Cool, yeah. I would highly recommend the interviews, the podcast interviews, and I'll leave it at that. They're really good.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.